Ilia Topuria is about to walk into the White House. Not metaphorically. Literally. The actual White House. And the man standing across from him is a 37-year-old with nothing to lose, a chin made of granite, and a career that has been building toward this exact moment for over a decade. This is not just a fight. This is the single biggest event in the history of mixed martial arts. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. Let's start with the venue, because people are already forgetting how insane this is. Promoters have done big things before. The Sphere in Las Vegas was a spectacle. Times Square has hosted press conferences. The pyramids in Egypt had a boxing match last year and everyone lost their minds. But the White House? A combat sports event at the White House of the United States? That has never happened. It will never happen again. Dana White didn't just think outside the box. He eliminated the box entirely. The closest historical parallel isn't even a sports event. It's the Rumble in the Jungle. Ali versus Foreman, Zaire, 1974. A heavyweight championship on the African continent, with a black promoter, a black referee, in front of a crowd that had never been given a stage like that. It took over 50 years for something to match that level of rupture. This is it. Now let's talk about the men in the cage. Ilia Topuria comes in as the most dominant champion the lightweight and featherweight divisions have seen in years. He has not lost. Not once. Not in a close call, not in a robbery, not in a fight where people said, he got lucky. His record is clean and his finishes are clinical. He walked through Josh Emmett. He dismantled Alexander Volkanovski, who had only lost to Islam Makhachev at that point and was considered nearly untouchable. He beat Max Holloway, the man who many argue is the greatest featherweight of all time, in a fight that wasn't as competitive as the scorecard suggested. And then Charles Oliveira, a Brazilian legend, a submission artist with 40-plus finishes, a man with real size and real power at lightweight, came in as a genuine threat and left the cage without his belt in a matter of rounds. In every single UFC fight Topuria has had, he is now the biggest favorite he has ever been. That is remarkable. Usually the longer a champion reigns, the closer the odds get. With Ilia, it's moving in the other direction. The market understands what the tape shows. Justin Gaethje is a different kind of story. And here's the honest version of it, not the hype version. His last two wins were over Rafael Fiziev and Paddy Pimblett. Those are solid names. Pimblett had been marketed as a future contender, and there was legitimate excitement around that fight. But when it happened, Paddy looked limited in ways that surprised even Topuria's own camp. They went on record saying they expected more from him. That's not a knock on Gaethje for winning. Winning is winning, but context matters when you're evaluating a man's form heading into a title fight. Neither Fiziev nor Pimblett belong in the top 5 of the division on their best day. Gaethje won those fights in his usual style. Gritty, chaotic, absorbing damage to deal damage, relying on his extraordinary durability to outlast opponents who expected to hurt him and couldn't. It worked. But it didn't look dominant. It didn't look inevitable. What makes the Gaethje situation even more complicated is his track record at the absolute highest level. When Justin Gaethje has been in the room with the true elite, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway, he has not won. And those aren't just losses. They're the same opponents that Ilia Topuria either shares in common or has outright dismantled. Oliveira submitted Gaethje and lost a unification fight to Ilia. Holloway beat Gaethje and then got finished by Ilia. The triangle is damning. These are not made-up MMA statistics. This is a direct chain of results that tells you something real about the gap in level. But here's where it gets interesting, because dismissing Gaethje entirely would be a mistake, and I won't do that. Gaethje is one of the most uniquely dangerous fighters the sport has ever produced. He has 15 bonuses in UFC history. 15. Charles Oliveira, who has fought almost twice as many times, has more total bonuses, but nobody in the history of the organization has a better bonus per fight average than Justin Gaethje. He doesn't just win fights, he turns every Octagon appearance into an event. And beyond the entertainment value, there are real tactical problems he creates that Ilia is going to have to solve. The low kick is the one that should concern Topuria fans the most. Gaethje is elite at this. He made Khabib Nurmagomedov, Khabib, the man who destroys everyone, visibly limp in round 1 of their fight. He damages legs systematically and intelligently, using them to set up everything else. And here's the specific biomechanical issue for Ilya. Topuria fights with his weight loaded onto his front foot. That is how he generates power on his lead hand, his jab, his crosses. It's a deliberate stylistic choice that makes him explosive and dangerous. It also makes that front leg a target that is harder to protect than it would be for a more upright fighter. If Gaethje commits to attacking that leg early, and Ilya doesn't adjust quickly, the accumulation of damage could change the entire dynamic of the fight even without a dramatic finish moment. The other piece that doesn't get enough attention is Gaethje's defensive intelligence. People watch his fights and see a brawler. They see someone who walks forward and eats shots and keeps coming. What they miss is that he's actually one of the more technically sound defensive fighters in the division. He creates angles. He pulls back out of range at the right moments. He controls clinch positions better than his reputation suggests. He is not simply a man who survives through toughness alone. He survives through positioning and toughness combined. The difference matters, because Ilya can't just throw big and expect Gaethje to be standing there waiting for it. There's also a coaching narrative worth following here. Trevor Whitman, Gaethje's trainer, had a direct conversation with him in the lead-up to this camp. He told Justin, "You have to decide who you are. You can be the most entertaining fighter in UFC history, the highlight reel, the chaos agent, the guy who makes every fight a war. Or you can be champion." Justin said champion. Now, whether that actually translates into a different game plan inside the cage is a separate question. People say things in interviews that don't always survive contact with a real opponent. But if Gaethje actually fights this one with more patience, more structure, and less ego than he usually brings, the fight becomes more complicated for Topuria than the odds suggest. Let's talk about the scenarios where this goes wrong for Ilya, because being honest about a fighter you believe in is more valuable than pretending the threats don't exist. The first scenario is the leg kick path. Gaethje targets the front leg relentlessly from the opening bell. Ilya either can't adjust or adjusts too slowly, and over 3 rounds the damage compounds enough to take away Ilya's footwork and his ability to generate offense off his front side. This doesn't guarantee a Gaethje finish, but it changes the fight fundamentally. A hobbled Ilya is a different problem than the Ilya we've seen. The second scenario is what I call the Nate Diaz problem. In UFC 196, Conor McGregor was winning that fight on the feet. He was faster, sharper, more technical, landing the cleaner shots. And Nate Diaz just kept absorbing them and coming forward. And absorbing them. And coming forward. And then Conor's pace dropped slightly, and Nate's straight left found the mark once, and then twice, and suddenly Conor McGregor was on the mat getting choked out in the second round. Now apply that template here. Replace Nate's chin with Gaethje's chin, which might actually be superior. Replace Nate's volume with Gaethje's pressure and leg kick attrition. And imagine a version of this fight where Ilya is landing, clearly landing, but Gaethje isn't going away, and round 3 arrives with Ilya slightly more tired than expected and Gaethje finding one of those heavy hands at exactly the wrong moment for Ilya. That scenario is not likely, but it is real. And it is the exact scenario that should make any honest Topuria fan slightly nervous. The third scenario is the decision. It's the least likely and the most boring, but it's worth acknowledging. Ilya's 2 UFC decisions were both clear. Gaethje's 4 UFC decisions were all competitive and could have gone other ways. If this fight somehow goes the distance, which would be a minor shock given what both men bring, Justin Gaethje has a history of getting the benefit of close rounds. Judges make mistakes. Scorecards surprise us. It's a non-zero possibility. After this fight, the paths diverge dramatically based on outcome. Ilya wins, which is the expected outcome, and he becomes the global face of combat sports. The image of Topuria holding both belts at the White House goes out to every newscast on the planet. His next chapter involves 3 names. Arman Tsarukyan is the unfinished business, the fellow Georgian-raised fighter who is ranked at the top of the division and who Ilya has personal history with. Islam Makhachev is the legacy fight, a double champion beating the pound-for-pound #1 to make a case for being the best fighter alive. And if Conor McGregor beats Max Holloway and comes back into the picture, that becomes the spectacle fight. Not a legacy argument, but a financial and cultural phenomenon that only boxing and MMA can produce. Ilya understands the difference between legacy and spectacle. He'll want both. Gaethje wins, and this is the scenario nobody wants to say out loud but everyone should be prepared for, and the entire trajectory changes. Ilya doesn't disappear. He doesn't retire on a loss. He comes back angrier and more motivated than he's ever been, demands an immediate rematch, and suddenly a trilogy is being discussed for a fight that wasn't even supposed to happen. The sport gets more Topuria fights, which is objectively good, but the narrative becomes messy in the way that only unexpected losses can create. It's an outcome nobody in Ilya's corner is entertaining, but preparation requires acknowledging it. Here is where this lands. Round 1 of this fight is going to be volatile. Gaethje is going to come out with a plan, with aggression, with those low kicks, and he is going to make the early minutes feel dangerous. Ilya is going to be disciplined, patient, reading the timing and the patterns the way he always does. By round 2, the picture clears. Ilya finds the combinations that land at the right angle, at the right moment, and Justin Gaethje, with all his toughness, all his durability, all his will, does not survive the precision. Knockout or technical knockout, round 2. That's the call. Ilya Topuria. White House. History.